Folks, we're moving out this week on another episode of Military Collectors. We are going to be in Monroe, North Carolina, Warbirds Over Monroe. Lots of airplanes, lots of great action on this week's episode of Military Collectors.
31, ready to check. Roger that.
Welcome to Military Collectors this week. We are in Monroe, North Carolina, home to Warbirds Over Monroe, one of the biggest collections of airplanes, military memorabilia that you'll find in the Southeastern United States. Warbirds Over Monroe is the largest Southeastern air show that you will find, and we're here. Right behind me is Tinker Belle, the C-46. It is a 1944 vintage plane. She is the only world-class flying troop transport left in the world that actually flies, and it's owned by the city of Monroe, North Carolina. She goes all over the country to air shows throughout the United States, and we do reenactments here, an actual jump. Paratroopers from reenacting groups actually will jump out of Tinker Belle all over the country. And nonetheless, we are here this week on Military Collectors to showcase airplanes, and that's what it's all about this week on Military Collectors. Each November, the city of Monroe, North Carolina hosts Warbirds Over Monroe. But for this town, it's more than just another air show. For this community, it's a way of giving back.
This was our 8th year. We started it as a means to give back to our veterans, to have a Veterans Day celebration. Started actually about 10 years ago with a couple guys and a nonprofit group here at the airport. Had a fly-in, invited some of their friends with these vintage aircraft. Then came on board, the city came on board and said, hey, let's do an air show. So we had 20 planes that first year and just had more and more each year. Got the community involved. We're a huge aerospace community. So we have close to 3,000 jobs that just deal with aerospace. So we got buy-in from our community, from our local businesses. And man, it has just really blossomed. Each year it gets bigger and better. And it's just a way for the city to give back to the veterans and have a great quality of life thing for our residents.
There are many air shows across this great country, but Warbirds Over Monroe is a little different, as they give those in attendance a small glimpse back into the history of aviation and the planes that fought from World War II to modern times.
Warbirds Over Monroe, we're basically a warbird air show, meaning we've got planes from World War II. We typically have about 40 different aircraft out here, some that are based here, some that are based local, but we pull from everywhere from Pennsylvania and Delaware all the way down to Florida. So we have about 40 of these planes here. We're a tight, compact area, so we really pack them in, but we really get the people up close to these planes. We want them to touch them, we want them to talk to the pilots. A lot of air shows you go to nowadays, everything's happening way over there, so you're basically just seeing the planes flying. We want people to come and get educated and entertained. We want people to come and see a plane like this, say, hey, what is that? What did that plane do during the war? Or what was the significance of that aircraft? And I think our show kind of is set apart from other shows because we really push that. We really push the education piece. We want the kids and parents and grandparents to share and to learn and just feel what the history of these planes have inside them and what role they played in our history.
Not only does Monroe, North Carolina put on a great air show each November, but they have also adopted one of the last operational C-46 aircraft, Tinker Belle. She's a star no matter where she flies in this great country and has brought many of the memories for those men and women who served during World War II.
Well, the C-46 Commando was built by the Curtiss-Wright Aircraft Corporation starting in 1940 to 1945. There were 3 factories, one in Buffalo, New York, one in St. Louis, Missouri, and one in Knoxville, Tennessee. They built a total of 3,181 of the C-46 Commandos. Out of that, today, we have approximately 5 of them left flying in the world. The Tinker Belle is the only C-46 Commando that is in the original paint scheme that was issued when it came out of the factory in Buffalo, New York in September of 1944. The aircraft was essentially made famous by its flight over what's known as the Burma Hump, flying support missions from India over Burma and into China to support General Claire Chennault's Flying Tiger Group. The aircraft was able at that time to carry more cargo and fly higher and fly faster and further than any other aircraft of its type.
Among modern aircraft, the C-46 can sometimes be a challenge to fly, and it takes an experienced pilot to make sure it's properly flown.
The challenge to flying the C-46, of course, is, first of all, it's a tailwheel aircraft, which was designed in early aviation, history of aviation and aerospace. The second is she was powered by the two most powerful engines, the Pratt & Whitney R2800s, each developing 2,000 horsepower on takeoff. What we have on this aircraft is a particularly large stabilizer and a small rudder, whereas on the competitor, the Douglas DC-3, they had a very small stabilizer and a very large rudder, giving the pilot more control in case of an engine failure or even in slow flight maneuvering. This aircraft does take a little more skill in the fact that one has to overcome the tendencies of those engines and the tailwheel, especially when we have crosswinds and of course our limitations being approximately 15 knots of wind.
Not every pilot will get the chance to experience what it's like to fly such a piece of American history. But most pilots who fly these older aircraft have different experiences to tell.
Well, flying this piece of American aerospace and wartime history is almost like being able to take the Declaration of Independence home in your back pocket and review it, look at it carefully, look at who signed it, look at the signatures, the type of writing, the parchment on the paper, and then sending it back when you're through.
When we come back, we're going to be featuring one of the most beautiful airplanes and airframes that I know the skies have ever seen, the Corsair, and we're going to talk to the pilot who restored it and flies it every week throughout the country at air shows just like this one here at Warbirds Over Monroe.
Military Collectors is brought to you today by GovPlanet, your online auction site for government equipment, by Chevrolet. Chevrolet, find new roads. And by the South Carolina National Guard Museum. Discover the Palmetto State's military history. If you're in the market for military surplus for recreation or construction, or you just want to own a piece of military history, go online to GovPlanet.com's weekly auction. GovPlanet has auctions every Wednesday, where you can find and bid on numerous items. All items are protected by ironclad insurance, which makes sure that what's in GovPlanet's report is what you're getting. Be sure to join GovPlanet every Wednesday for their weekly auction, and check in often to see their ever-changing inventory. GovPlanet, your online auction site for government equipment. Travel back into time. Experience how America gained its freedom and fought to keep it. Come see up close the weaponry and the stories of the United States military from 1670 to present day at the South Carolina Military Museum in Columbia, South Carolina. The South Carolina Military Museum is one of the largest military museums in the country, and its mission is to honor and chronicle the American soldier with artifacts and exhibits. The South Carolina Military Museum, preserving our military legacy for all generations.
Welcome. Hi. Today we're going to be comparing the roll-formed high-strength steel bed of the Chevy Silverado to the aluminum bed of this competitor's truck. We're going to grab that empty toolbox for me. Let's start here with the aluminum bed.
That's a big hole. Huge. We got Swiss cheese for a truck here. I'm curious to see if that will do the same thing with the Chevy.
Well, let's find out. Same spot, same angle, same empty toolbox.
Took it way better.
The steel held up.
Silverado proved it is the toughest truck here.
Roger that.
Welcome back to this week's Military Collectors. We're going to take a look at one of the most beautiful airframes that you'll find at any air show, and right here in Monroe, North Carolina. It would not be complete without a Corsair flying somewhere up in these beautiful North Carolina skies. Let's take a look at this Corsair and the guy that makes her go. Well, folks, joining me now is Jim Tobel. He is the owner, and I tell you what, the pilot of this beautiful Corsair behind us here. This is a 1981 Passion build. Tell me about this beautiful airplane here, Jim. This is just, I am in awe of this plane. Tell me about it.
Well, this aircraft was actually my dad and I have a lot of aviation background. I was flying airplanes when I was 9 years old in my dad's old Stinson 108. And his passion was warbirds. And so we had a number of airplanes. But in 1981, we had the opportunity to purchase this aircraft in parts. And we trucked it home. Took us 10 years to build it. In 1991, we got it flying again. And it was just a day, it was December 7th, 1991.
Pearl Harbor Day.
Pearl Harbor Day. What a day.
Oh my goodness. Well, listen, tell me a little bit about the process, okay, that you and your dad went through here in order to put this airplane together. I mean, you know, that's kind of a special thing, father and son. I mean, you know, of course, you were a young man then. How did you get this passion to do this?
Well, we started out in Model Ts and Model As, did cars and trucks and all kinds of things, and then migrated towards aircraft. And being that my dad and I are both engineers, we enjoy kind of playing with different aspects of rebuilding. And so this was a challenge. We got a truckload of parts and we had to go figure out what went where and how. And we did. And what parts we didn't have and couldn't find, we had to make. So we acquired the original manufacturing drawings to that airplane so that we could make the parts properly and to be airworthy. So it was a long process. Fortunately, we had most of the parts, but not all the parts.
Well, tell me specifically a little bit about this particular airplane. I mean, when was it built, and do you have the history back on when the thing came off the line?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because we didn't know at the time. We acquired the aircraft, brought it home, then we went to the Naval Archives to find out the history of the aircraft. Found out, number one, it was built in 1945, accepted in the Navy November. And then we started looking at where it had its service. And because it has a unique bureau number, 97143, we were able to track it. So going through the archives, we found out it was on the USS Valley Forge and the Boxer and the Oriskany during the Korean War. We then took and found the squadrons of the different boats, found 6 pilots that actually flew this in combat, have copies of the logbooks making all the different runs, and realized that this aircraft did well over 200 combat missions in Korea by itself. So that was an honor, and some of these guys would come out and help us and facilitate some of the rebuilds, bring in their grandchildren, and this is the plane they actually flew in combat. It was very, very heartwarming for us. So it represented not only my father and I, but also the families that were involved in this aircraft and in the squadrons. Then we found out it was sold to Honduras, fought in the El Salvadorian Honduran War called the Soccer War in the 60s, and made it through that war, became a derelict, then found its way back to the States in 1977, and then we acquired it in 1981. So the history is a rich Navy history as well as others, but as a combat vet, it served a lot.
Well, and I know your father was a Marine Corps, Semper Fi. You were born in Cherry Point.
I was born 1957 in Cherry Point.
Oh my goodness.
And I was actually supposed to fly, I was slated to fly my dad's old squadron, VMF 231, Ace of Spades out of Cherry Point, in Harriers. And the Hawaiian life came, and it was an ailing family business of the Marine Corps. And of course, you know, I asked my dad, what should I do? And he said, son, you have to make your own decision. And I knew what it was.
Yeah.
I helped the family business and we grew it, but that opportunity was there.
Well, all of the pleasure that veterans get, that they see this beautiful bird play a role in shows like this weekend. I mean, how much of a rush do you get when you power that thing up and run down the runway? I mean, that has to be just, I guess, just something that undescribable.
Well, you know, every time I get in there and I place my feet on the rudder pedals, number one, I think about all those pilots before me that flew this aircraft. And it humbles me to know that I'm a caretaker and keeping this airplane alive for other people to see and feel. It's not as sitting in a museum. You can actually hear it, see it, feel it, and even smell it. When it starts up and the little cloud of smoke kicks out, that's something that hopefully will be around a long time. But when I actually fly the airplane, you got 2,600 horsepower, and it's a ride and experience that it is hard to even describe. I fly a lot of different airplanes between bombers and fighters and trainers and L-birds, even helicopters.
Wow.
And probably the Corsair is my most favorite because not a lot of pilots can fly them. It's got the hose nose, you sit way back, very high, and it's very heavy. And so when I come into land, my AOA, my angle of attack, is very high. I lose all forward visibility. Wow. And I have 1 foot peripheral vision on both sides, and so I just watch the edges of the runway as I come in and touch down, and I see nothing forward.
Godspeed. God bless you for all you do for all the veterans out there.
Well, thank you, sir.
And I will tell you, folks, I've got to tell you, this guy has a lot more of these airplanes and a collection. And so on future, hopefully, episodes of Military Collectors, we're going to get down there and we're going to see some of these things.
The door is open.
Ah, you bet. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. When we come back, after this break, we're going to be talking about the P-51 Mustang and the special pilot that puts her in the air.
How's it going?
Hi.
Today we're going to be comparing the roll-formed high-strength steel bed of the Chevy Silverado to the aluminum bed of this competitor's truck.
Awesome.
All right, let him drop.
Let's see how the aluminum bed of this truck held up.
That's a good sized puncture.
That's all the way through for sure.
Full on crack here.
You're aluminum now, you're gonna go, ooh.
Let's check out the Silverado's steel bed.
Wow.
Yeah, a couple dents.
I'd expect more dents.
Chevy clearly held up better than the Ford.
Travel back into time. Experience how America gained its freedom and fought to keep it. Come see up close the weaponry and the stories of the United States military from 1670 to present day at the South Carolina Military Museum in Columbia, South Carolina. The South Carolina Military Museum is one of the largest military museums in the country, and its mission is to honor and chronicle the American soldier with artifacts and exhibits. The South Carolina Military Museum, preserving our military legacy for all generations. If you're in the market for military surplus for recreation or construction, or you just want to own a piece of military history, go online to GovPlanet.com's weekly auction. GovPlanet has auctions every Wednesday where you can find and bid on numerous items. All items are protected by ironclad insurance, which makes sure that what's in GovPlanet's report is what you're getting. Be sure to join GovPlanet every Wednesday for their weekly auction and check in often to see their ever-changing inventory. GovPlanet, your online auction site for government equipment.
Roger that.
Welcome back to Military Collectors. Well, we're going to have a special segment here on the P-51 Mustang, and I know many of you folk out there who may or may not be collectors, or you may not recognize airframes, but this is not a P-51 Mustang. This is not even an American Warbird. This is a German. It is a 149 Focke-Wulf. And this thing is beautifully restored. It's here in the hangar in Monroe, North Carolina, and that's going to be for a story for later on Military Collectors. But let's take a look at the P-51 Mustang here, Warbirds Over Monroe. Well, folks, joining me now is Scott Scooter Yoke. He is the owner and the pilot of this beautiful P-51 Mustang back here. And I tell you what, Scott, thank you so much, man, here being on Military Collectors. Not only are you, hey, I'm almost speechless with this beautiful airframe here. Tell us about Quicksilver. This thing is awesome.
Okay, well, Quicksilver was a 15-year restoration. It was by my father and myself. We restored it in Lewisburg, West Virginia. It was made up of over 200 different Mustangs, known Mustangs, I should say. And we stopped counting at 200. I guarantee you it's probably more than that. But the airplane was a massive undertaking, and every external skin except for 2 was replaced.
Well, the year you think this was built, or you know it was built?
It was built in 1945.
Okay.
So this airplane was a post-war production airplane.
Oh, wow. I mean, you know, if history could talk. Tell me a little bit about some of the features. I know the paint, and it's just, it's almost, it just takes your breath.
Sure. So some of the main things that made the P-51 the legendary fighter that it was, we'll start right here with the wing, was the laminar flow wing. Okay?
Right.
So it was made incredibly efficient at high altitude, and it was just made to be really low drag, and pretty much made it the ultimate dogfighter up at altitude. It was a high altitude, high speed escort fighter, and the wing is really what set it apart from every other airframe that flew in World War II.
Wow.
Okay. Another thing was the engine. This is a Rolls-Royce designed, Packard-built Merlin.
Okay,
right.
So there's a myth about engines in Mustangs, okay?
That's correct, because there really was never a Rolls-Royce engine in the airplane. All the engines were built by the Packard Motor Car Company.
I got you.
So this is an American-built, English-designed engine. Okay?
Wow.
And there's a lot of differences between a Rolls-Royce and a Packard. There's a lot of differences. And this engine is a 2-stage, 2-speed supercharger, approximately about 1,600 horsepower, driving a 4-bladed propeller. Okay, this is a D model. What made it the D model is the bubble canopy. Okay, so it gave you the ultimate view, 360 degrees around the pilot. For the first time, he could look directly behind him and see the tail.
Oh, wow.
And there's no obstructions behind him. So it's an ultimate view. It's a very well balanced, very well behaved fighter, and it's everything you would design, and it looks and sounds like an airplane should look and sound. That's the key about a Mustang.
Well, I have to ask you, you're how old now?
I'm 31.
You're 31, and you've been flying for how many years?
I've been flying for 16 years.
And collecting for?
Well, I've been collecting majority of my life, but collecting airplanes since I was 25.
Well, you know, these are special collections, okay?
Yes.
Because, I mean, not only do you have, I mean, you know, I collect vehicles, okay, and that sort of thing, but it's got four and rubber. This has to be just one of the most exciting and tedious things, I think.
It is.
From because it's got a FAA standards and all of that. It's got to be.
Yep. So this airplane obviously is more in depth than a car restoration would be.
Right.
All the standards have to be met. All the regulations have to be met in order to keep it airworthy, but yet semi-original, and trying to keep a well balance of authenticity and safety. Okay. The original aircraft had a fuselage fuel tank that's in the back. It created a aft CG problem in the aircraft, and it also presented fuel in the cockpit, which we don't really necessarily want.
No.
And so we take that out and we put a back seat in the back to give distinguished veterans and distinguished visitors rides.
That's awesome. Well, let me ask you a little bit about the restoration process on one of these. I mean, every nut, every bolt, I mean, everything. And of course, obviously 15 years, but
Yes.
Then after that, who maintains this thing?
I do. So being part of the build team, if you will, with my father, we have an in-depth knowledge of this specific airframe, okay? Now, there's some things that differ from Mustang to Mustang, but this one was, obviously there's nobody that knows it better than myself and my family. So we maintain the aircraft. We also maintain other aircraft, other P-51s, other fighters and trainers and bombers and all sorts of stuff.
So it's your business.
It's our business. That's what we do.
And
it's
it's
how we
your
make our
life.
living.
It's your passion.
It's in my DNA, man. It's not coming out anytime soon.
That's what I'm talking about. Well, I tell you what, Scott, Godspeed, God bless you for all that you do for the veterans around this country. It's just a very, very special opportunity for military collectors and me. I'm an infantry guy, okay? I walk for a living, but
you did the dirty work.
I always marveled, okay? Whenever I rode in my day, C5, a C-141, a C-130, or a C-17, but these, and you guys that fly them and you maintain them, my hat's off to you, and God bless you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Military Collectors is brought to you today by GovPlanet, your online auction site for government equipment, by Chevrolet. Chevrolet, find new roads. And by the South Carolina National Guard Museum. Discover the Palmetto State's military history. If you're in the market for military surplus for recreation or construction, or you just want to own a piece of military history, go online to GovPlanet.com's weekly auction. GovPlanet has auctions every Wednesday, where you can find and bid on numerous items. All items are protected by ironclad insurance, which makes sure that what's in GovPlanet's report is what you're getting. Be sure to join GovPlanet every Wednesday for their weekly auction, and check in often to see their ever-changing inventory. GovPlanet, your online auction site for government equipment. Travel back into time. Experience how America gained its freedom and fought to keep it. Come see up close the weaponry and the stories of the United States military from 1670 to present day at the South Carolina Military Museum in Columbia, South Carolina. The South Carolina Military Museum is one of the largest military museums in the country, and its mission is to honor and chronicle the American soldier with artifacts and exhibits. The South Carolina Military Museum, preserving our military legacy for all generations.
Welcome.
Hi.
Today we're going to be comparing the roll-formed high-strength steel bed of the Chevy Silverado to the aluminum bed of this competitor's truck. We're going to grab that empty toolbox for me. Let's start here with the aluminum bed.
That's a big hole. Huge. We got Swiss cheese for a truck here. I'm curious to see if that will do the same thing with the Chevy.
Well, let's find out. Same spot, same angle, same empty toolbox.
Took it way better.
The steel held up.
Silverado proved it is the toughest truck here.
Roger that.
Our featured email this week comes from George Stansfield from Dallas, Texas. Bob, I am an aviation veteran of the Korean War and have a local group of veterans that are always discussing vintage military aircraft. Our latest question that no one could seem to agree on was, what was the most famous aircraft of World War II? I say it was the Corsair, but none of my Navy friends says it is the P-51 Mustang. Can you help us with the answer? George, it was the P-51 Mustang. It became the leading U.S. fighter in the European theater of operation during the final months of the war. The Mustang was designed and rolled out in 117 days. It was first flown on October 26, 1940. The P-51 is the collective of every contemporary advanced aerodynamic and structural design. Primarily, it was the first fighter with a laminar wing design. As a result, it held an exceptional internal fuel capacity and low drag, enabling it to fly an extended combat radius. If you would like to have your military restoration project or collectible featured on the show, just send an email with your photos to photos@militarycollectorstv.com.
That's our episode this week of Military Collectors. We hope you enjoyed it. Warbirds Over Monroe. If you want to know when the next show's coming up in the out future years, just log on to their website at warbbirdsovermonroe.com. And I will tell you, all the guests of our show this week, they're very special collectors. They're just passionate about what they do, and that's what Military Collectors is all about. We hope you've enjoyed our show this week. We'll see you next week on another episode of Military Collectors.